The street looked harmless. That was the dangerous part. It was one of those quiet residential streets where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. The kind of place where mornings arrived slowly, carried by the sound of distant engines starting, doors opening and closing, and the soft echo of footsteps on concrete. The houses stood close together, familiar with one another, their fences low and their driveways worn smooth by years of routine. To an adult, it was a street that barely deserved attention. To a child, it was a world. She stepped outside, holding nothing but her curiosity. The door behind her closed with a gentle click, not slammed, not rushed, just closed. She had done this many times before, walked a few steps onto the sidewalk, looked at the cracks in the pavement, followed the tiny ants marching in lines she imagined were roads of their own. Her feet moved slowly, guided by thoughts that jumped from one thing to another without warning. She was small, still learning how big the world really was. The air carried the smell of morning, cool, clean, mixed with something faintly mechanical. Somewhere nearby, a vehicle had been running for a while. She didn't know where exactly. She didn't need to. Sounds like that blended into the background of her days, just part of how mornings worked. She looked down at her shoes. One lace felt looser than the other. As she bent slightly, a memory passed through her mind, not as a thought, but as a feeling, a warmth, the sense of someone once crouching in front of her, fingers quick and gentle, fixing things before they became a problem. That someone was not there anymore. She knew that, in the simple way children accept facts without fully understanding them. Her mother had already passed. People said it softly around her, as if lowering their voices could soften the meaning. Still, the feeling stayed. She straightened up and took another step forward. The street stretched ahead of her, empty at first glance. Then, she noticed it. A large truck parked several houses down. It was angled slightly, occupying more space than the other cars. Its back end faced her direction, broad and tall, like a wall on wheels. She didn't think of it as dangerous. She barely thought of it at all. To her, it was just something big. The engine sound changed. It wasn't loud. That was what made it unsettling, though she didn't know the word for it. The low hum shifted, deepened slightly, as if the street itself had taken a breath. The truck's brake lights flickered on for a brief second, then off again. Behind the wheel, the driver checked mirrors with practiced movements. The street looked clear, too clear to worry. She continued walking, distracted now by a leaf stuck to the ground, its edges curled and dry. She nudged it with the tip of her shoe. It didn't move. She tried again, harder this time, giggling softly when it finally slid across the concrete. Behind her, the truck began to move. It started slowly, rolling backward inch by inch. The sound of tires on pavement was steady, controlled. No urgency, no sudden noise that would demand attention, just a quiet motion that blended into the morning like everything else. She was now closer to the center of the street. Something small happened then. So small, no one would ever think to point it out later. Her shoe caught slightly on the uneven edge of the sidewalk. Not enough to make her fall. Just enough to make her stop. Just enough to make her look down again. She frowned at the ground. For a moment, time stretched. The truck continued its slow reverse. The driver glanced at one mirror, then the other. Sunlight reflected oddly, creating a glare that hid details. He adjusted his position, confident in his control of the space behind him. The child shifted her weight, preparing to step off the curb. And then she heard it. Not the truck, not the engine. Something else. A sound she couldn't identify. But that made her pause. It was as if the world had whispered her name without using words. A familiar pull, gentle but firm, tugging her attention away from where she was about to go. She hesitated. Her heart beat faster, though nothing obvious had happened yet. She felt that warmth again. The same presence she felt at night sometimes, or when she was scared for reasons she couldn't explain. Her mother had already passed, everyone said so. And yet, in moments like this, it felt as though she was not alone at all. She turned her head, slightly. That small delay changed everything. The truck's rear tires crossed the exact spot where she would have stepped. The space filled with metal and shadow, the ground disappearing beneath its bulk. The driver still hadn't seen her. From his seat, the street remained empty, cooperative, predictable. She stood frozen, one foot lifted, confusion flickering across her face. Subscribe and leave a like if stories like this remind you how fragile and precious ordinary moments can be. The truck kept moving. A neighbor's door opened somewhere nearby, the sound sharp and sudden. A voice called out, not in alarm yet, just casual. The driver glanced up, distracted for a split second. His foot eased slightly on the brake. The truck slowed. The child lowered her foot back onto the curb instead of stepping forward. She didn't know why. She only knew that something inside her had told her to wait, to stay where she was, to look again. Her eyes followed the movement of the truck now, understanding beginning to form in the simplest way possible. Big things could hurt. Big things didn't always see small ones. The truck rolled back another inch, then another. Her breath caught in her chest, and just as she shifted again, preparing to move, either forward or backward, she wasn't sure. The truck's brake lights flared bright red. It stopped. Abruptly enough to jolt the driver forward in his seat. Abruptly enough that the silence afterward felt loud. The child didn't move. Neither did the truck. For a moment, the entire street seemed to hold its breath. Then the driver leaned out his window, looking behind him for the first time with real focus. His eyes widened as they landed on her, standing exactly where his blind spot had been moments before. If she had taken that step, if she hadn't paused, if something somewhere hadn't intervened in a way no one could see. The thought never finished forming. The danger had passed. But only just. And the reason why would remain invisible to everyone watching. The driver's face drained of color as the realization settled in. He put the truck fully into park and climbed down faster than his body liked, boots hitting the pavement with a dull thud. His eyes stayed locked on the child, as if looking away might allow time to rewind and redo what had almost happened. "Hey there," he said, keeping his voice low, careful not to startle her. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Her heart was still beating too fast, her chest tight in a way she didn't yet have words for. She stayed on the curb, just as she had been, as if an invisible line had been drawn there, and she knew better than to cross it. A neighbor hurried over from across the street, one hand still gripping their phone, the other reaching out instinctively toward the child without touching her. Another door opened. Someone else looked out from a window. The quiet street filled with movement and murmurs. All of it, arriving just after the danger had passed, never before. "That was close," someone said. "Way too close." The driver rubbed a hand over his face, exhaling hard. "I didn't see her. I swear. Checked my mirrors twice." No one accused him of lying. There was nothing to argue about. Everyone knew how blind spots worked. Everyone knew how easily this kind of thing could happen. That knowledge made the silence heavier, not lighter. The child watched them all, their words drifting above her head like clouds she couldn't quite reach. She didn't cry. That surprised the adults later when they talked about it among themselves. They would say she was calm, unusually so. That she just stood there, eyes wide, as if she had stepped out of a dream. Inside her, something else was happening. The warmth hadn't left. If anything, it had grown stronger, wrapping around her like a familiar blanket. It wasn't frightening. It didn't feel strange. It felt right, in a way that made sense only to her. Her mother had already passed. She knew that. But the feeling was the same one she remembered from long ago, from mornings when she had been helped into shoes, from afternoons when a gentle hand guided her away from hot surfaces or busy streets before she even understood why. Someone took her hand at last, a neighbor she recognized by sight, but not by name. The hand was warm, solid, real. Still, it wasn't the hand she was thinking about. They led her back toward her house. The door was opened, voices calling out to see if anyone was home. There was no answer. That fact seemed to alarm the adults more than anything else. A child alone, near a moving truck with no one inside the house. The story rearranged itself in their minds, growing sharper edges. "She shouldn't be alone," someone said softly, as if the words themselves might bruise her. "She won't be for long," another replied, already dialing a number. She sat on the front step while they talked. The concrete was cool beneath her legs. She picked at a small chip in the paint near the doorframe, the adrenaline slowly draining from her body and leaving behind a deep, unfamiliar tiredness. Her hands trembled slightly. She pressed them together to make it stop. That was when she felt it again. Not warmth this time, but pressure. Gentle, steady, as if someone were sitting beside her, close enough that their presence altered the air. She didn't turn her head. She didn't need to. She knew. Her mother had already passed, but she had not gone far. The adults didn't notice anything unusual. They were too busy reassuring one another, replaying the moment in different versions. If she had stepped sooner, if the truck had moved faster, if no one had opened that door at just the right time. They called it luck. That was the only word they had. The child rested her head back against the door and closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, images flickered. Not memories exactly, but impressions. The sound of a voice, reminding her to wait. The feeling of being held back just enough. The sense that something terrible had been paused, frozen in place, then gently redirected away from her. She opened her eyes again when someone knelt in front of her. "Hey," the neighbor said kindly. "What's your mom's name, sweetheart?" The question landed softly, but it echoed loudly inside her. "She's not here," the child answered after a moment. The adults exchanged glances. They assumed she meant not home, not yet, somewhere else. That was easier. "She'll be back soon," the neighbor said. "Who else can we call?" The child shook her head. Words felt heavy now, complicated. She didn't know how to explain that her mother had already passed, that she existed now mostly as a feeling, a presence that appeared when danger came too close. Adults didn't usually understand things like that. A car pulled into the driveway minutes later. Another adult, breathless and pale, rushed out, dropping keys, scooping the child up into a tight embrace. Questions spilled out all at once. "Are you okay? What happened? Did you get hurt?" She buried her face against the familiar shoulder and breathed in. The world felt steadier again, but the warmth remained, hovering just beyond touch. Inside the house, the story was retold again and again. The truck, the blind spot, the timing. Each retelling made it seem less real, more distant, as if danger lost its power once it had been avoided. Adults liked that illusion. It helped them sleep. The child listened quietly from the couch, legs tucked beneath her. Her gaze drifted to the front door, to the line of light at its base, to the space beside it that felt full even when it was empty. That night she dreamed. She was back on the street, the truck looming behind her, the sound of the engine low and constant. This time, she didn't hesitate. She stepped forward. In the dream, there was no pause, no delay. The truck moved faster. The space closed in. Just before Everything disappeared, a hand wrapped around her wrist. She woke up with a sharp gasp, sitting upright in bed. The room was dark, quiet, except for her own breathing. Her heart hammered painfully against her ribs. She looked down at her wrist. Nothing was there. Still, the feeling lingered, strong enough to bring tears to her eyes. Her mother had already passed. That truth was unchanged, but the protection remained. Over the following days, life returned to its routines. The truck never came back to that street. The adults spoke of the incident less and less until it became a remember when story, stripped of its fear and reduced to a lesson about watching kids near roads. The child, however, noticed things. She noticed how she sometimes stopped walking for no clear reason, only to see a car speed past moments later. How she hesitated at the top of the stairs just before slipping on a step that had been damp. How she reached for a doorknob and then pulled her hand back, only to find it was hot. Each time the same sensation preceded the pause. That gentle pressure, that quiet insistence. She never told anyone. She didn't have the language for it, and even if she did, she sensed it was something fragile, something that worked best when left unnamed. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, as she walked the same street again, holding an adult's hand this time, she noticed something new. Far down the road, another truck was parked. This one was different, larger, louder, its engine already running. And as she felt that familiar warmth begin to rise once more, she realized, with a clarity that made her stomach drop, that whatever had protected her before was about to be needed again. Because this time, the danger was coming faster and there might not be enough time to stop it the same way. The truck was farther down the street than the first one had been. That detail mattered, though she didn't yet know why. Distance changed how danger announced itself. It made things feel slower, safer, even when they weren't. She walked beside the adult, their hands linked, her steps matching the rhythm she'd learned over time. The sidewalk was warm from the afternoon sun. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed. A dog barked once, and then went quiet. Everything felt ordinary enough that her body almost forgot what it had learned to fear. Almost. The warmth returned without warning, not sudden, not sharp. It rose gently, like a tide coming in. It wrapped around her chest, and settled there, steady and unmistakable. She tightened her grip on the adult's hand without realizing it. "Easy," the adult said, smiling down at her. "We're just walking." She nodded. She didn't stop, but her eyes stayed on the truck. It was parked at an angle, larger than the one before, its sides dull with use. Boxes were stacked near its rear, and a metal ramp lay folded underneath. Someone was inside the cab. She could see the outline of a person through the windshield, head turned. Slightly, attention focused somewhere else. The engine idled, louder than before. The street narrowed at that point. Cars were parked along both sides, leaving just enough room for traffic to pass through carefully. It wasn't a place designed for big vehicles to maneuver easily. She sensed that in the way the adult beside her slowed down, in the way their shoulders tensed just a little. They approached an intersection where the sidewalk dipped to meet the road. Painted lines marked a crossing, faded but still visible. The adult paused there, looking both ways. The truck remained still. For a moment, the warmth eased. She breathed out, and then the truck shifted. The sound changed first. A subtle drop in pitch, the mechanical signal that something was about to move. The brake lights flared briefly, then went dark. The adult noticed it too, their body reacting before their mind caught up. "Hold on," they said, stopping again. She stopped with them, one foot slightly forward, balanced on the edge of the curb. The warmth pressed closer now, firmer than before, not urgent, but insistent, like a hand resting between her shoulder blades. The truck began to roll backward, slowly at first, its movement barely perceptible against the backdrop of the street. The driver leaned forward, checking mirrors, confident in the space behind him. From where he sat, the crossing looked empty. The adult and child were just outside his field of view, tucked between parked cars and the angle of the road. The adult hesitated. The crossing was technically theirs. The truck was still several yards away. Everything suggested they could move safely if they just went now. She felt the urge to pull back. Her fingers curled tighter around the adult's hand. She tugged, just a little. "What is it?" the adult asked, distracted, eyes still on the truck. She didn't answer. She didn't have words. She only knew that stepping forward felt wrong in a way that went beyond fear. It felt like ignoring a rule she had learned without ever being taught. The adult looked down at her then. Really looked. Noticed the way her face had gone still, the way her gaze was fixed not on the truck itself, but on the space behind it, the invisible path it was carving through the air as it moved. "Okay," the adult said softly. "We'll wait." The truck continued reversing. Another car approached from behind it, horn tapping once in impatience. The driver waved a hand out the window without turning around, signaling for the car to wait. He focused on adjusting his angle, on lining the truck up with the curb. He did not see the child. She shifted her weight back fully onto the sidewalk, relief flickering briefly through her chest. The warmth softened, but it didn't disappear. It lingered, watchful. A delivery worker appeared near the back of the truck, arms full of boxes. He stopped short when he saw the vehicle moving, stepping back to avoid it. One box slipped from his grip and hit the ground with a dull thud. The sound echoed louder than it should have. The adult flinched, the child startled. The delivery worker cursed under his breath and bent to pick it up. The truck did not stop. The driver, focused on his mirrors, missed the worker's movement entirely. The blind spots were larger on this truck, the angles more deceptive. The adult's jaw tightened. "Hey!" someone shouted from down the street. The driver's head snapped up. His foot hovered over the brake. In that instant, everything aligned again. Timing, chance, attention. The warmth surged, stronger than it ever had before, flooding the child's senses. Her ears rang slightly. The world narrowed. The adult took a step back without thinking, pulling her with them. The truck's rear passed through the space they had just occupied, close enough that she could feel the vibration through the ground. The driver slammed on the brake. The truck stopped abruptly, tires screeching. The delivery worker stumbled back, boxes forgotten. The impatient. Car honked again, longer this time. Silence followed, thick and heavy. The driver climbed down, anger and fear warring across his face. "I didn't see you," he said again, louder now, defensive and shaken. "You came out of nowhere." "We were right here," the adult replied, voice tight but controlled. "You were backing into a crosswalk." The argument threatened to grow, but the child barely heard it. Her heart was pounding too hard, her limbs buzzing with leftover adrenaline. She felt dizzy, unsteady. And through it all, the warmth remained. It wasn't fading like before. It was holding firm, as if bracing her. She looked around, half expecting to see someone standing close, someone others somehow couldn't notice. There was no one. Just the street, the truck, the adults raising their voices. Her mother had already passed. That truth felt heavier now, sharper. And yet, the presence was undeniable. It felt closer than ever, as if the line between past and present had thinned. The adult crouched down in front of her, hands on her shoulders. "Are you okay?" they asked again, more urgently this time. She nodded, but her eyes filled with tears anyway, not from fear alone, from something else, something that felt like recognition. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the truck moving backward, saw the space closing in, saw herself frozen between stepping forward and staying back. Each time she felt that pressure guiding her, stopping her just in time. She sat up in bed and hugged her knees to her chest. The room was dark, quiet. The house settled around her with familiar sounds. "I know," she whispered into the darkness, unsure who she was speaking to. "I know." The warmth answered, gentle and steady. Days passed again, but this time the adults noticed changes. She hesitated more often, paused at doorways, stopped mid-step for no visible reason. They called her cautious, sensitive, observant. They didn't see what she felt. They didn't feel the subtle shifts in the air before something went wrong. The way silence sometimes arrived a heartbeat too early. The way her chest tightened just before danger appeared. The protection was working, but it was changing. It no longer came only in moments of immediate threat. It lingered longer now, like a warning that stayed lit even after the danger had passed. It made her tired. It made her older in small, invisible ways. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the street, she stood by the window and watched cars pass. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, eyes serious beyond her years. A truck turned onto the street. Her breath caught. This one was different again, smaller, faster, moving with less care. Music thumped from inside it, windows down. The driver laughed at something unseen. The warmth flared instantly, sharp enough to make her gasp. The truck accelerated, and as it began to reverse toward a driveway directly across from her house, she realized with a sudden chilling certainty that this time she wasn't close enough for timing alone to save her, and whatever was protecting her would have to find another way, fast, before someone else stepped into the path she had learned to avoid. She pressed her palms against the glass, not hard enough to leave prints, just enough to ground herself. Outside, the truck slowed, then stopped at an angle that blocked half the narrow street. The driver leaned out the window, still laughing, still distracted, calling something to someone inside the house he'd pulled up to. Music kept playing, bass-heavy, steady, masking other sounds. The warmth surged again, but this time it felt different, tighter, focused. Not just a warning, but a push. She stepped back from the window. Her heart was racing, but her mind felt oddly clear. Clear in the way it did when she knew she had to act, even if she didn't understand why. The house was quiet. The adult was in the back room on a call, voice low and serious. No one else was watching the street. She moved toward the front door. Her hand hovered over the handle, hesitating for a fraction of a second. Not fear, calculation. The warmth shifted, guiding her not away, but sideways. She turned instead and grabbed her shoes from where they sat by the wall. One slipped on easily. The other resisted, heel folding under. She stopped, adjusted it, tied the lace carefully. That small delay mattered. Outside, the truck's reverse lights flicked on. The engine pitch changed again, sharper this time, less patient. The driver checked one mirror, then the other, movements lazy, practiced. From his angle, the street behind him looked clear enough. A delivery bike was parked further down, a trash bin near the curb, nothing else of note. Across the street, a side gate opened. A woman stepped out, phone pressed to her ear, attention split between the call and the task of dragging a wheeled bin toward the curb. She didn't look up. She didn't, see the truck yet. She was focused on getting the bin into position before the next car came through. The warmth flared hard, almost painful. The child opened the front door. The hinge creaked softly, not enough to draw attention from inside the house. She stepped out onto the porch, the evening air cool against her skin. The street felt different now, taut, like something stretched too far and about to snap. She didn't run. Running would draw attention, might cause confusion. She walked quickly, instead controlled, the way she'd learned to do when crossing streets with adults. Her eyes stayed locked on the truck, on the woman with the bin, on the shrinking space between them. "Hey!" she called out. Her voice was small, but clear. The woman glanced up, distracted, smiling automatically at the sight of a child. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, still holding the phone to her ear. "Just a second." The truck began to move. The bin's wheels caught slightly on the uneven pavement. The woman tugged. Harder, stepping backward without looking. Her heel slipped off the curb, balance shifting. "Wait," the child said louder now. The word cut through the music just enough to make the driver pause. His head turned, irritation flickering across his face. He leaned out again, eyes scanning, finally registering movement where he hadn't expected it. "What?" he started. The woman stumbled, the bin tipping toward the street. She gasped, phone slipping from her hand. The warmth wrapped around the child, like a current. She moved without thinking, darting forward just enough to grab the edge of the bin and pull it back toward the sidewalk. The woman regained her footing, shock flashing across her face as she looked down. The truck stopped. Hard. The sudden silence was jarring. Music cut off mid-beat. The driver cursed, slamming his hand against the steering wheel before climbing down, anger already giving way to fear as he took in the scene. The bin, inches from the truck's rear. The woman pale and shaking. The child standing far too close to everything. "What are you doing?" the driver snapped, then stopped himself. His voice softened, faltered. "You could have been hurt." The woman pulled the child back instinctively, hands trembling. "She saved me," she said, breathless. "I didn't even see the truck." The driver looked between them, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't see either of you," he admitted. "I thought the street was clear." The child barely heard them. The warmth was still there, but it was receding now, ebbing slowly like a tide pulling back after reaching too far onto shore. Her legs felt weak. She leaned into the woman's side, suddenly exhausted. Neighbors appeared again, drawn by the noise, by the tension in the air. Voices overlapped. Questions flew. The moment fractured into explanations and reassurances and nervous laughter. Inside the house, the adult rushed out at last, face draining of color as they took in the scene. "What happened?" they demanded, eyes scanning for injuries. "She stopped me from getting hit," the woman said quickly, still holding the child close. "Both of us, really?" The adult pulled the child into their arms, heart pounding. "Why would you run out like that?" they asked, fear sharp beneath the words. The child didn't answer right away. She rested her head against the familiar shoulder, eyes closing briefly. The warmth lingered faintly, like an afterimage. "I had to," she said finally. That was all. Later, after apologies were exchanged and the truck drove away for good, after the bin was set properly and the street returned to its usual rhythm, the house felt different. Quieter. Heavier. The adult hovered, checking on her constantly, asking if she felt okay, if anything hurt. She said she was fine. Mostly that was true. That night, she lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The events replayed in her mind, sharper this time, clearer. She hadn't just been protected. She had been guided to protect someone else. The realization settled slowly, uneasily. Her mother had already passed. That fact was unchangeable. But the presence she felt wasn't just shielding her anymore. It was shaping her choices, nudging her actions, pulling her into moments where she was needed. The thought scared her more than the trucks ever had. "What if I don't listen one day?" she whispered into the dark. The warmth answered, gentle but firm, like a reassurance without words. Days turned into weeks. The street remained busy. Trucks came and went. Cars reversed out of driveways. Life continued, indifferent to near misses and invisible interventions. The child grew more attentive. She watched people as much as she watched traffic, noticed patterns, learned to read the subtle signs adults missed. She didn't talk about it. She didn't have to. But something else began to change. The warmth no longer came only before danger. Sometimes it appeared in moments that seemed safe. Sometimes it lingered too long, making it hard for her to relax, to play without watching the edges of things. One afternoon, while walking home from school, she felt it again, stronger than usual, urgent. She stopped dead on the sidewalk. Behind her, another child bumped into her back, annoyed. "Why'd you stop?" they complained. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the intersection ahead. A delivery truck was approaching, too fast for the narrow street. Driver distracted, phone glowing in his hand. A ball rolled into the road. Another child chased after it. The warmth surged violently, almost knocking the breath from her lungs. She took a step forward, and then she froze. Because this time, the space between warning and action felt too small, too tight. The truck was closer than any before. The child running into the street was already moving, and for the first time she didn't know if being warned would be enough. The world narrowed to sound and motion. The ball bounced once, twice, bright against the gray of the street, and the other child lunged after it without slowing. Laughter burst from their mouth, careless and high, the sound of someone who believed the street would always wait. The truck did not wait. Its engine roared louder as it closed the distance, tires humming against the pavement. The driver's eyes were still angled downward, attention split, mind elsewhere. From where he sat, the road ahead looked clear enough. A child at the edge of the sidewalk barely registered as a shape, let alone a risk. The warmth surged through her chest like a wave breaking all at once. It was no longer a suggestion. It was a command. She moved. Her feet left the sidewalk before her mind could catch up, body acting on instinct, sharpened by every near miss before this one. She ran forward, arms pumping, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear free. The air rushed past her ears, muting everything except the low growl of the truck and the frantic thud of her own pulse. "Stop!" she screamed. The word tore out of her, raw and desperate. The other child turned at the sound, confusion flashing across their face just as they reached the ball. Their foot caught it awkwardly, sending it skidding sideways instead of back toward them. They stumbled, losing balance, falling backward onto the street. Time fractured. The truck was too close now, too fast. The driver finally looked up, eyes widening as the scene snapped into focus, far too late. His foot slammed onto the brake. The tires shrieked. She reached the fallen child and grabbed their arm, yanking with every ounce of strength she had. The warmth wrapped around her completely now, no longer just a presence, but a force, steadying her grip, driving her forward. The child cried out, startled more than hurt, scrambling as she pulled them toward the curb. Their bodies collided, tangled, momentum carrying them both sideways. The truck skidded. For a split second, it felt as if the street itself tilted. The world lurched, metal screaming against asphalt. The front of the truck dipped as the brakes fought to stop it, inches blurring together in a rush of noise and motion. They hit the ground hard on the sidewalk. She felt the impact through her shoulder, sharp and jarring, knocking the breath from her lungs. The other child landed half on top of her, crying now in earnest. She wrapped her arms around them without thinking, curling her body protectively. The truck stopped. Its bumper loomed at the edge of the curb. So close she could see dirt splattered along the paint. Close enough that if she reached out, she could touch it. Silence crashed down just as violently as the noise had erupted. Then chaos followed. Adults shouted. Someone screamed. Feet pounded toward them from every direction. The driver burst out of the truck, face ashen, hands shaking as he stared at the space where the children lay. "Oh my God," he said, voice breaking. "Oh my God, I didn't see." Hands reached for them, lifting, pulling them apart gently. Someone took the other child first, scooping them up and pressing them to their chest, murmuring reassurances. Another set of hands steadied her, easing her into a sitting position. Her vision swam. The warmth that had carried her through the moment ebbed suddenly, draining away as fast as it had arrived. In its absence, exhaustion crashed down on her, heavy and disorienting. Her limbs felt weak, trembling uncontrollably. She tried to stand and nearly collapsed again. "I've got you," someone said quickly, catching her under the arms. She nodded, though she wasn't sure what she was agreeing to. The adult who had been walking with her earlier pushed through the crowd, panic written across their face. "What happened?" they demanded, eyes darting between her and the truck and the other child. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head slowly. Her throat felt tight, words stuck somewhere she couldn't reach. "She pulled my kid back," the other child's parent said, voice shaking. "She pulled them out of the street." The adult stared at her, disbelief mixing with fear. "You ran into the road," they said softly, almost to themselves. She looked up then, eyes glassy but steady. "I had to," she whispered. An ambulance siren wailed somewhere far off, though no one had called yet. Neighbors hovered, some crying openly now, others holding their phones uselessly, recording or dialing or simply clutching them as if they were anchors. The driver sank onto the curb, head in his hands. "I was looking at my phone," he admitted hoarsely. "Just for a second." No one responded. There was nothing to say. She was guided away from the street, away from the truck, toward a nearby porch where she was helped to sit. Someone draped a jacket around her shoulders, even though she wasn't cold. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The other child was nearby, clinging to their parent, eyes red and wide. They looked at her with something like awe, something like fear. "Thank you," the parent said, voice cracking. "You saved them." The words felt strange, heavy. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt hollowed out, as if something essential had poured through her and left her emptier than before. The warmth was gone completely now. In its place was a deep, aching silence. Her mother had already passed. That truth pressed against her chest with new weight. In every moment before, the presence had felt protective, reassuring. Now, for the first time, she felt its absence sharply. "What if it doesn't come back?" she thought, panic flickering beneath her exhaustion. That night, she slept poorly. Her dreams were fragmented, restless. She saw streets stretching endlessly, trucks appearing from every direction, children stepping into danger again and again. Each time she ran toward them, heart pounding, legs burning, always just barely in time. But in the dreams, she was alone. She woke before dawn, gasping, sheets twisted around her legs. The room was quiet, too quiet. She sat up, slowly, waiting. Nothing happened. No warmth, no pressure, no familiar presence. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "I did what you wanted," she whispered into the darkness, unsure why she believed that was true. "I listened." The silence remained. Days passed in a blur. The adults hovered even more now, rarely letting her out of sight. The story spread through the neighborhood, growing with each retelling. People called her brave, remarkable, special. She didn't like the words. They made her feel exposed, as if something private had been dragged into the light. She avoided the street whenever she could. When she did walk outside, she felt raw, unprotected. Every engine sound made her flinch. Every reversing light sent a jolt of fear through her chest. Without the warmth, the world felt sharper, more dangerous. She began to wonder if the protection had limits, if there was a cost to using it, if stepping in front of danger for someone else had changed the rules. One afternoon, as she sat alone in her room drawing, the feeling returned. Faint at first, almost imagined. She froze, pencil hovering over the page. The warmth grew slowly, cautiously, like a hand reaching out after being burned. It didn't flood her the way it had before. It settled instead, gentle, but wary. Relief washed over her so suddenly she laughed, then clapped a hand over her mouth, tears spilling free. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm listening." The warmth pulsed once in response. That night, as she lay in bed, the presence stayed with her, steady and calm. She felt watched over again, but also watched, as if whatever remained of her mother was closer now, more involved, but also more careful. The next morning, the sky was overcast, the street damp from early rain. She stood at the front window, watching reflections ripple across the pavement. A truck turned onto the street, not fast, not loud, but its hazard lights were off and its reverse alarm was broken, emitting no warning sound at all. The warmth flared sharply. She stepped back from the window, heart racing. Outside, further down the street, a stroller rolled slightly forward as a parent adjusted something at the curb, momentarily distracted. The truck began to reverse, and this time she understood with chilling clarity that whatever was protecting her was no longer content to just warn her. It was asking her to choose, again, whether she was willing to step into danger before anyone else realized it. Was there? She didn't think in full sentences anymore when it happened. Thought took too long. The warmth rose like a silent siren, and her body responded before she could weigh rules or consequences or what the adults would say about her running outside again. She saw only the stroller's small front wheels angled toward the street, saw the parent turned slightly away, hands busy with something, maybe a bag, maybe a strap, saw the truck's reverse lights glow pale against the damp morning, and felt the air tighten with that familiar, unbearable knowing. She opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The rain had stopped, but everything still gleamed. The pavement was slick. Sounds traveled differently when the world was wet, quieter and sharper at the same time. The truck's engine a low, steady rumble that seemed to vibrate through her ribs. The truck wasn't huge, but it was tall enough to block sightlines, and it was backing without any beep, no repetitive warning, nothing to tell anyone it was moving except the faint roll of tires and the shifting pitch of the engine. She moved faster than she should have, not running hard, not wild, but quick, focused, feet careful on the damp steps. The warmth pressed against her spine, urging her forward and slightly to the side, as if steering her away from the slickest patch of concrete. She felt it in the way her foot chose the safer step without her looking, in the way her hand brushed the railing instinctively for balance. Subtle, realistic, like heightened attention, like instincts sharpened by fear and repetition. "Excuse me," she called, voice cutting through the quiet street. The parent didn't turn at first. They were crouched by the stroller, one hand holding the handle, the other tugging at something near the seat. The child inside the stroller was small, bundled up, staring upward at the sky with that blank, peaceful expression babies had when they trusted the world completely. The stroller's back wheel was on the curb. One front wheel hovered on the slope of the driveway's edge, ready to roll. The truck continued reversing. The warmth surged, and she felt it change again, less like a warning now, more like a firm hand on her shoulder guiding her into a decision. The space between her and the stroller seemed to stretch and shrink at the same time, her mind measuring distance with a kind of clarity that made her dizzy. She stepped off the porch and onto the walkway. Inside the house, a floorboard creaked. Someone was moving in the kitchen. If she shouted loud enough, maybe the adult would come running. But the adult would lose precious seconds asking what was wrong. The stroller would keep rolling. The truck would keep moving. She made herself smaller and quicker, slipping between puddles. "Hey!" she called again, louder. "Your stroller!" The parent finally looked up. Their face held mild annoyance at first, then confusion as they followed her gaze to the truck. Their eyes widened. They tightened their grip on the stroller handle, pulling it back toward them. But it was already moving, just a little. The stroller's wheel rolled, sliding on wet concrete. The parent's hand jerked. The stroller wobbled toward the street. The warmth flared so hard it almost made her stumble. She reached the stroller and put both hands on its side, steadying it with a force that surprised her. The metal frame was cold and damp beneath her fingers. The baby's eyes shifted to her, curious, unafraid. "Hold it," she said, voice tight, not commanding, just urgent. "Please." The parent grabbed the handle firmly and yanked the stroller backward onto level ground. The wheels bumped over the curb edge with a soft thud. Safe. Just barely. The truck's rear swung closer, the driver still reversing, still not looking fully behind, trusting mirrors that didn't show everything. The parent threw up a hand and waved. "Stop! Stop!" The driver's head turned. He saw them. His foot hit the brake. The truck jolted and stopped with a squeal of wet rubber. A silence fell, heavy with what almost happened. The parents' shoulders trembled. They looked down at the stroller, then at the child, then at the truck, their mouth opening without words coming out. The driver leaned out the window, face tense. "I didn't see you," he called, defensiveness and fear tangled together. "I'm sorry, I thought you were backing with no alarm," the parent snapped, voice shaking. "No sound, nothing." "It's broken," the driver said, as if that explained it, as if a broken warning meant the street should somehow become safer on its own. The parent hugged the stroller closer to their body, like shielding it from the air. Their eyes darted to the girl standing beside them. You saw it," they said, breathless. "You saw it before I did." The girl nodded. Her own knees felt weak. Her hands were trembling, and now that the immediate danger had passed, she could feel how cold the morning really was. How damp her sleeves were from brushing the stroller frame and the wet air. "Thank you," the parent whispered, voice breaking. "Thank you so much." The warmth receded but didn't vanish. It lingered behind her ribs, steady and watchful. Not triumphant, not relieved, just present, as if waiting to see what she would do next. She backed away slowly, letting the parent take full control of the stroller. The driver remained stopped, eyes flicking from the parent to the child, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. He looked unsettled, maybe because he recognized how close the truck had come, or maybe because something about the way she moved, fast, precise, didn't match the size of her body. The adult from her house appeared at the doorway then, drawn by raised voices. "Hey!" they called, alarm rising. "What's going on?" The girl's stomach tightened. She turned slightly, meeting the adult's gaze across the short distance. She could already see the reaction forming. Fear, anger, relief, confusion. The adult started down the steps quickly. The parent lifted a hand, gesturing toward the truck. "She warned me," they said, voice still shaking. "Your kid warned me. The truck was reversing, no alarm, and my stroller rolled. She helped me pull it back." The adult froze mid-step, their face draining. They looked at the truck, then the stroller, then the girl. "You went out there?" they asked, voice low, controlled but trembling underneath. "Again?" The girl opened her mouth. The words didn't come easily. She could explain what she felt, but not in a way that sounded reasonable. Not in a way that would make adults nod and say, "Of course, that makes sense." She could only say the truth in the simplest form. "I had to," she whispered. The adult's eyes squeezed shut for a second, as if trying to hold back their own fear. They hurried forward and took her by the shoulders, checking her quickly, hands sweeping over her arms, her hair, her face as if searching for injuries. "You can't just run into the street," they said, voice cracking. "You can't. Do you understand how—" "I didn't run into the street," she said quietly, surprising herself with the calm in her voice. "I stopped at the curb. I held it. I didn't go behind the truck." The adults stared at her, startled by the clarity, by the detail. They looked back at the parent as if to confirm. The parent nodded emphatically. "She did exactly what she said. She didn't dart behind anything. She just knew." This adult's grip loosened slightly, but their hands still trembled. "Okay," they said, more to themselves than anyone else. "Okay, let's go inside." The parent wheeled the stroller away, still murmuring thank you. The driver remained parked, eyes down, shame settling across his face. He eased the truck forward eventually, leaving the street as carefully as if it were made of glass. Inside the house, the air felt warmer, safer, but the safety was an illusion now. The adult closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling hard. Their eyes were wet. They didn't look angry, not really. They looked terrified. "What is happening?" they asked, voice small. Why are you always there?" The girl stood in the hallway, shoes still damp. The warmth hovered in her chest, steady but quiet, as if it knew this conversation mattered. She swallowed. "It's like—" She struggled for words. "It's like I feel it before it happens, like my body knows." The adult rubbed their face, exhausted. "That's called anxiety," they said softly. "That's called being scared because of what happened before. And I get it. I do. But you're a child. You can't carry the world on your shoulders." The girl looked down at her hands. She could still feel the stroller's cold metal. She could still see the truck's reverse lights. She could still hear the tires on wet pavement. "If I don't go," she said, voice barely audible, "then what?" The adult didn't answer immediately. They walked into the living room and sat heavily on the couch, elbows on knees, hands clasped. "Listen," they said at last, choosing each word like it might break something. "Bad things happen. Sometimes people get lucky. Sometimes they don't. We can't control everything." The girl's chest tightened. The warmth pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat behind her own. Her mother had already passed. That truth sat at the center of her life like a stone. She didn't expect the world to be fair. She knew, in her child's way, that things could vanish without warning. But this sense of warning, this pressure, this guidance, felt like a thread that still connected her to something she wasn't ready to lose. "I'm not trying to control everything," she said. It happens. And then I know." The adult looked up at her, eyes searching. "Know what?" The girl hesitated. She could say, "I feel Mom." But the adult would flinch. They would hear it as grief talking. They would worry. They would call someone. They would whisper about therapy and trauma and how to help her move on. She didn't want the warmth dissected, explained away, turned into something clinical, so she said the safe version. "I know when to stop," she whispered. "I know when to wait." The adult nodded slowly, as if accepting that much was easier. "Okay," they said, voice softer now. "Then we're going to learn how to do that safely. We're going to make rules. You don't go out alone. You don't step off the curb. You tell me or you tell an adult, even if you think it's faster to do it yourself." The girl's stomach sank. Rules took time. The warmth didn't always give time. The warning sometimes arrived like a quiet thought, but sometimes it hit like lightning, leaving only seconds to move. "What if there isn't time?" she asked. The adult's eyes closed again. Then you scream, they said. You scream so loud the whole street hears you. You don't run into danger, you make other people look. The girl nodded slowly, though she wasn't sure it would work. Adults didn't always look when they should. Adults were distracted. Adults trusted mirrors and assumptions and the false calm of routine. That evening, the adult made changes. They talked to neighbors. They asked people to be careful. They walked her to school and picked her up, holding her hand tightly at every crossing. They avoided the busiest streets. They watched her like a hawk. The girl tried to relax. She tried to be normal. She tried to let other people handle things. But the warmth kept coming. It came at the grocery store when a cart rolled too close to a toddler. It came at the park when a gate didn't latch fully. It came when a dog's leash slipped in someone's hand. Each time she stopped, her breath catching. Each time, she looked around, trying to decide if she should scream, if she should pull an adult's sleeve, if she should trust that someone else would notice. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they didn't. And each time she hesitated, the warmth pressed harder, like a hand tightening around her heart, asking her to choose. One night, weeks later, she sat on the floor in her room, lining up toy blocks in careful rows. The adult was cooking dinner, the smell of something warm and simple drifting down the hallway. Rain tapped lightly against the window. The world felt calm for the first time in a while. Then the warmth flickered. She froze, block in hand. It wasn't strong at first, just a whisper of pressure. She waited, heart rising, listening. The house was quiet except for the distant clink of dishes. She stood slowly and walked to her bedroom door, peering into the hallway. Nothing looked wrong. The warmth surged, sharper now. She moved toward the front of the house, stepped silent on the carpet. The adult called from the kitchen without turning. "You okay?" She swallowed. "Yeah," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. At the front window, she parted the curtain slightly. Outside, the street was darker than usual under the rainy sky. Headlights moved through the mist. A truck was turning onto their street, bigger than the last one, its engine low and heavy, its body almost blending into the dim light. It slowed near their house. Her breath caught. The truck's reverse lights clicked on. And at that exact moment, as if the warmth had been guiding her attention for a reason, she saw a small figure on the sidewalk across the street. Another child, younger than her, half hidden by a parked car, stepping closer to the curb to watch. The truck without understanding what reversing lights meant. The warmth slammed into her chest like a fist. She opened her mouth to scream, and no sound came out. Her mouth stayed open for a heartbeat too long, the air cold on her tongue, but nothing came out. No shout, no warning, not even a gasp loud enough to carry past the glass. It was like her voice had been unplugged. Like the warmth that had always guided her had pulled everything inward, leaving her frozen between panic and purpose. Across the street, the smaller child took another half-step forward, curious, unafraid, eyes fixed on the big truck like it was a toy. The reverse lights shone pale in the rain. The truck began to move. She forced air into her lungs again, tried to scream a second time. Still nothing. Not even a whisper. Her throat tightened, refusing to cooperate, as if her body had decided there was no time for sound. The warmth pressed harder, not comforting now, demanding. She backed away from the window, fast, nearly tripping over the edge of the rug. The room swayed. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to ball them into fists to keep from dropping everything. She ran down the hallway, feet muffled by carpet, heart slamming against her ribs with the same frantic rhythm she remembered from the first truck, the first near miss, the first impossible pause. The kitchen light glowed warm and ordinary, a betrayal. The adult was at the stove, stirring something, shoulders relaxed, unaware that the Street outside had become a blade again. She grabbed the adult's sleeve with both hands and tugged hard. "What?" the adult began, startled, turning. The girl tried to speak. She pointed, mouth moving, throat locked. No sound. The panic rose hot in her eyes. "Hey, slow down," the adult said, immediately shifting into concern. They knelt in front of her, hands on her arms. "What's wrong? Talk to me." She shook her head violently, pointed again toward the front of the house, and tugged. The warmth pulsed like a drumbeat under her skin, insisting, "Now, now, now." The adult followed her gaze, saw the urgency, stood quickly. "Okay, okay. Show me." They hurried together toward the front window. The girl's legs felt boneless, but the warmth held her upright, pushed her forward. She didn't feel brave. She felt like a door being pushed open from the inside. At the window, the adult pulled the curtain back. Their face changed instantly. The truck was already reversing, its bulk sliding backward in the rain, tires rolling silently on wet pavement. The smaller child across the street stood near the curb, just beyond the shelter of a parked car, their small hands gripping a toy, mesmerized by the movement of the big vehicle. The adult's breath sucked in sharply. "Hey! Hey!" they shouted, voice exploding into the room and out through the slight gap at the window frame. The child across the street didn't react. The rain muffled sound. The truck's engine swallowed it. The adult yanked the front door open and ran out onto the porch without even grabbing shoes, calling again, louder, sharper. "Stop! Move back! Get away from the street!" The girl followed to the threshold, stopping there like the adult had taught her. "Don't step off the curb! Don't run into danger! Make people look!" Her throat still wouldn't cooperate. She gripped the doorframe so hard her fingers hurt. The adult sprinted across the yard, shoes slipping slightly on wet grass, arms waving to catch attention. The truck continued reversing. The driver's head angled to one side, checking mirrors, confident, unaware of the child's position behind the parked car. The smaller child finally turned their head, confused by the adult's sudden movement. Their eyes widened. They took one step backward, then another, but not enough. Still too close. Still in the path of what the driver couldn't see. The adult reached the curb and threw an arm out, palm up at the truck in a universal stop gesture, then pointed sharply at the child, motioning them back. The driver saw the adult at last. He slammed the brake, but the truck didn't stop immediately. Wet pavement, momentum. It rolled another foot, maybe two. The adult lunged, scooped the smaller child by the shoulders and pulled them backward onto the sidewalk in a single desperate motion. The truck stopped with a jolt. Rain pattered in the sudden silence, and for a moment, everything was still except the adult's chest heaving as they held the smaller child close. The driver leaned out the window, face pale. I didn't see them," he shouted, voice strained. "I swear I didn't see them." The smaller child began to cry, frightened now, the fear arriving late the way it always did when danger was too fast to understand. The adult held them steady, murmuring quick reassurances, then looked around for the child's parent, eyes scanning the street with anger and panic mixed together. A door across the street flew open. A woman rushed out. Hair pulled back hastily, face crumpling as she saw her child in someone else's arms. "Oh my God!" she cried, running forward. "Oh my God!" The adult handed the child over carefully, still shaking. The woman clutched them to her chest and sobbed, repeating "thank you" over and over, words tumbling out in broken pieces. The driver stayed frozen in the cab, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. The girl stood in her doorway across the street. Rain air, cool against her face, watching it all as if from a distance. The warmth inside her finally loosened, the pressure easing slightly now that the danger had passed. Her voice returned in a rush. She inhaled sharply and let out a sound that was half sob, half breath. The sudden ability to make noise again startled her. She pressed a hand to her throat, stunned by how fragile that small function suddenly felt. The adult looked up and caught her eye across the street. The look they gave her was not pride, not relief. It was something heavier. A question that had been building for weeks, now too large to ignore. How did you know? They walked back toward the house after the street settled, after the truck pulled forward slowly and left, after the smaller child was taken inside, still crying. The adult's hands trembled as they crossed the yard. Rain dotted their hair and clung to their shirt. Their mouth was set in a tight line. Inside, they shut the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. They looked at the girl like she was both precious and frightening. "You couldn't speak," the adult said quietly, voice careful. "You tried. I saw you. You tried to yell." The girl nodded, eyes wide. "It didn't work," she whispered. It wouldn't come out." The adult's gaze flicked down to the girl's hands, the way her fingers still clutched the edge of her sleeve, the way her knuckles were pale. "That's not normal," they said, not accusing, just stating. That's not just being scared." The girl swallowed. The warmth hovered faintly behind her ribs, quieter now, almost shy after the storm it had caused. She didn't want to name it. Naming it made it sound like something adults would try to fix, or explain away. But the adult kept going, voice steady with effort. "You knew there was a child out there before I did. You knew the truck was going to reverse before anyone else moved. You've been doing that, over and over." The girl looked down at the floor. "I feel it," she said. The adult's eyes softened, then tightened again with fear. "Feel what?" The girl hesitated. Her mother had already passed. Everyone said it. The adults said it gently, as if gentleness could protect her from the meaning. She knew where her mother wasn't. She knew what was missing. And yet the warmth felt like a hand she remembered, a presence that didn't belong to fear alone, a presence that had the texture of love. She lifted her eyes. "Like someone is telling me," she whispered, voice trembling. "Not with words, just telling me." The adult's throat moved as they swallowed. They sat down slowly on the couch as if their knees had given out. "Who," they asked carefully, "would be telling you?" The girl's chest ached. The answer lived there. It had lived there since the first time she stood at a curb and paused, since the first time she felt warmth when she was supposed to feel alone. She didn't say the name. Instead, she said, "Someone who cares." The adult closed their eyes. For a long time, they didn't speak. When they finally did, their voice was quieter than the rain. "I miss her too," they said, and the words carried a weight that made the room feel smaller. "Every day." The girl felt tears spill down her cheeks, hot and sudden. The warmth pulsed gently, like a heartbeat answering from somewhere just beyond reach. Her mother had already passed, but somehow, some way, the caring remained. "I'm not making it up," the girl whispered, desperate. Now, terrified the adult would think she was pretending, that they would push her into silence. "I'm not." "I know," the adult said quickly, surprising her. They opened their eyes and looked at her with something like surrender. "I can see you're not. I don't know what to do with it." The girl didn't either. For the first time, the adult didn't try to explain it away as anxiety. They didn't reach for easy labels. They simply sat with it, letting the truth exist in the room without tearing it apart. That night, they talked in small pieces. Not a dramatic conversation, not a big reveal, just fragments. The adult admitted how scared they were every time the girl moved suddenly, how every near miss had made them imagine the worst. The girl admitted how tired she was, how the warmth sometimes felt like a weight, how she worried she would miss a warning one day and someone would be hurt. The adult listened. They made new rules together, but the rules were different now. Not just limits, strategies. If the girl felt the warmth, she would touch the adult's arm twice. That meant, look now. If it was urgent, she would slap the window or bang on the door, anything loud enough to make attention happen. If she couldn't speak again, she would point and pull and refuse to let go until someone looked. They practiced. In the living room, in the hallway. The adult would pretend to be distracted and the girl would use the signals. The adult would respond fast, turning it into a game so it didn't feel like fear. But both of them knew it wasn't just a game. It was rehearsal. The warmth watched, steady and quiet. Days became weeks again, and something softened in the girl. Not the danger. That never softened. But her relationship with it changed. She stopped feeling like she had to carry it alone. The adult believed her now, at least enough to act when she signaled. That mattered. It made the warmth feel less desperate. Still, it didn't leave. Sometimes the girl would sit quietly with a book, and the warmth would appear for no reason she could see. She would look up and notice a cabinet door slightly open at head height, or a puddle on the tile near the stairs. Small things, fixable things, as if the presence wasn't only saving her from disasters anymore, but teaching her how safety was built from tiny choices. And sometimes, late at night, she would feel the warmth settle beside her bed like someone sitting down carefully, the way her mother used to sit when she was sick. The girl would close her eyes and breathe, letting the presence be what it was without forcing it into words. Her mother had already passed, but love had a way of lingering, especially when it still had a job to do. One afternoon, months later, they were walking home together, the adult's hand holding the girl's, their steps in sync. The street was busier than usual. A neighbor was having work done on their house. A contractor van was parked halfway onto the sidewalk. Tools clinked. People shouted measurements back and forth. Sawdust floated in the air like pale confetti. The girl felt normal for almost an entire block. Then the warmth flickered. She stopped. The adult stopped with her instantly. No questions, just trust. "Where?" the adult asked, scanning. The girl's eyes moved to the contractor van. It was parked at an angle, blocking part of the sidewalk. To get around it, pedestrians had to step closer to the street. A worker was carrying a long plank of wood, end sticking out behind him. Another worker was backing the van slightly, trying to adjust its position, attention split between mirrors and shouted instructions. A stroller approached from the opposite direction. A different parent this time, pushing quickly, head down, trying to navigate the crowded sidewalk without bumping anyone. The stroller's path would be forced toward the street right as the van backed and the worker swung the plank. The warmth surged, insistent, urgent. The girl tapped, the adult's arm twice, then again, fast. The adult's posture changed instantly. They stepped forward, raising a hand. "Hey, stop a second!" they called, loud enough to cut through the noise. The workers barely glanced, annoyed. The van continued backing. The parent with the stroller kept pushing, impatient, trying to squeeze past. The adult moved faster, stepping into the open space beside the van, palm out toward the driver. "Stop the van!" they shouted, voice sharp now. "There's a stroller!" The driver slammed the brake, startled. At the same moment, the worker with the plank turned, the long end swinging out, right at face level. The girl's breath caught. The warmth pressed hard, almost painful. The stroller rolled forward one more foot. The swinging plank and the stroller's path intersected in the air like two lines that should never meet. And for the first time since the rain night at the window, the girl realized the warmth wasn't just warning her anymore. It was warning her that, this time, even the adult might not be fast enough. The stroller rolled forward one more foot. The worker's hands were full, his grip imperfect, because he was trying to do two things at once: carry the plank and twist his body to hear what someone behind him was saying. The long end of the wood swung out in a smooth, careless arc, heavy enough that it wouldn't just startle someone, it could knock them down, could hit the baby's face, could turn a normal afternoon into something no one could take back. The adult's shout hung in the air, sharp and urgent. The van driver had stopped, yes, but stopping the van didn't stop the plank already in motion. Stopping the van didn't stop the stroller's wheels already rolling. The parent pushing it was still looking down, still trying to thread through the narrow gap, annoyed and focused on not bumping into a stranger, not on what was happening at head height. The girl felt the warmth surge so hard it made her stomach drop. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a vision. It was a pressure inside her chest that turned into action before her thoughts could form. Her mother had already passed, and yet the familiar insistence wrapped around her like invisible arms, steadying her spine, narrowing her focus to one simple truth: now. She slapped the adult's arm once, hard, then pointed, not at the van, not at the driver, but at the plank's swinging end. The adult's eyes snapped to it. Their face changed in an instant, the way a face changes when the brain finally calculates impact and distance and speed. They lunged forward, not into the street, not into the path of the van, but toward the parent with the stroller. They grabbed the stroller handle with one hand and the parent's forearm with the other, yanking backward with surprising strength. "Back! Now!" the adult barked. The parent stumbled, startled, eyes flying up just as the plank swept through the space where the stroller had been. The wood cut the air with a dull whoosh and struck the metal corner of the van with a loud clack instead of striking a child. The impact vibrated up the plank into the worker's arms. He jerked, swore, nearly losing his grip. The sound was so sharp it seemed to silence the whole worksite for a beat. Everyone froze. The worker turned, furious, ready to blame the nearest person for startling him, for making him swing wrong. But then he saw the stroller, saw how close it had been, saw the baby's wide eyes, saw the parent's face draining of color as understanding landed. The worker's anger fell away so fast it looked like shame. He swallowed. He started, then stopped. His hands tightened on the plank as if he suddenly didn't trust himself to hold anything safely. The parent clutched the stroller handle with both hands, knuckles white. They looked at the adult who had yanked them back, then at the plank, then down at their baby as if checking the baby with their eyes alone could undo what almost happened. "Oh my," the parent whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't see it. I didn't. Thank you. Thank you." The baby made a small sound, not crying, just confused by the sudden tension and movement. The parent leaned down, pressing their cheek to the baby's head, breathing like someone trying to convince themselves this was real and not a nightmare. The van driver climbed out halfway, leaning from the open door, eyes wide. "I stopped," he said quickly, defensive and shaken. "I stopped when you yelled." "I know," the adult replied, voice still sharp with leftover adrenaline but controlled. "It wasn't the van. It was that plank." The worker nodded stiffly, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "My fault," he said quietly. "I wasn't paying attention." The adult didn't pile on. There was no point. Fear was already doing the punishing. They just turned their head and looked back at the girl. The girl was standing exactly where she had been, feet planted, breath shallow. The warmth was still pressing behind her ribs, but it was easing now, like a grip loosening once the edge had been pulled back from the cliff. The adult walked to her quickly and crouched so their eyes were level. Their hands hovered near the girl's shoulders, not grabbing, not shaking her, just making sure she was still there. Safe. "You did good," the adult said softly. The girl's throat tightened. She nodded once, then blinked hard. Tears blurred the scene in front of her. Workers, van, stroller, plank, turning everything into soft shapes. The adult exhaled, slowly, then looked up at the parent with the stroller. "Are you okay?" they asked. The parent nodded too many times, the kind of nodding that meant they were barely holding themselves together. Yeah, yes, I will be. Thank you. Both of you." Their eyes flicked to the girl again, and the gratitude there was so raw it made the girl look down. The workers began to move again, more carefully this time. The plank was lowered to the ground. Someone repositioned the van with a person guiding from behind. Voices became quieter. The entire site seemed to shrink inward, humbled by how close normal had come to becoming something else. The adult took the girl's hand and guided her away from the cluster, steering them back toward the clearer part of the sidewalk. Their grip was firm, not restrictive, just anchoring. "You felt it again," the adult said, not a question this time. The girl nodded. "It was strong," she whispered. The adult swallowed. "I saw," they said. "You pointed before I did." They kept walking, their steps slower now, as if speed itself had become suspicious. The girl's heart was still beating hard. The warmth inside her had faded to a quiet hum, but it hadn't left. It felt like someone standing close behind her, a presence just out of sight. Not frightening, just steady. Her mother had already passed. She knew that in the simple, permanent way, children eventually learn what gone means. But love didn't always obey the same rules as bodies. Love lingered in habits, in memories, in instincts. Love sometimes showed up as a pause at a curb, as a hand that wasn't there, guiding timing by half a second. They reached home with rain still hanging in the air, the sky low and gray. The adult unlocked the door and ushered her inside, then locked it again, as if a lock could keep out everything they had seen. For a while, they didn't talk. The adult made tea they didn't drink. The girl sat at the table, staring at her hands, noticing how her fingers still trembled slightly. She was tired in a way that went deeper than muscles. The adult finally sat across from her, elbows on the table, hands clasped. Their voice was softer than usual. "Do you remember her?" they asked quietly. The girl lifted her eyes. "Yes," she said. It came out small, but solid. "What do you remember?" the adult asked. The girl stared at the tabletop, at the faint scratches in the wood, tracing them with her gaze as if the lines could help her find words. "Her smell," she said, after a moment. "Like clean and warm," she swallowed. "Her hands. When she fixed things, when she stopped me from doing dumb stuff." The adult's mouth trembled. They nodded, looking away for a second, blinking hard. The warmth in the girl's chest pulsed gently, like agreement. The adult looked back. "And now," they said, voice careful, "it feels like that again." The girl didn't answer immediately. She didn't want to say it wrong. She didn't want to turn something delicate into something that sounded impossible. But she owed the truth to the only adult who had started believing her, who had started moving when she signaled, who had sprinted into the rain and yanked a stroller back at the right second. "It feels like she's still trying," the girl whispered. "Like she still wants me safe." The adult breathed in slowly. "And you think," they said, almost whispering, "she wants other people safe too." The girl's eyes filled again. She nodded barely. "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes I think it's not just me." The adult reached across the table, hesitated, then covered the girl's hand with their own. Their palm was warm, real, heavy in the best way. "That's a lot to carry," they said. The girl squeezed back. "I don't want anyone to get hurt," she whispered. "I know," the adult said. And you shouldn't have to be the only one paying attention. They sat like that for a while, hands touching, both of them listening to the quiet in the house. The kind of quiet that could be peaceful or terrifying, depending on what you just lived through. Later that evening, the adult made changes again. Not dramatic ones, not panicked ones, but practical ones. They talked to neighbors about safety around trucks and vans. They asked the contractor to keep a spotter when moving vehicles. They explained the plank situation in plain words, without blame, because blame didn't prevent anything, but awareness sometimes did. The girl watched from the doorway while they spoke. She didn't feel proud. She felt relieved, like the burden had shifted just a little from her small chest into the community where it belonged. That night, when she lay in bed, the warmth returned more clearly, settling into the room like a familiar presence. Not loud, not flashy, not supernatural in any visible way. Just there, like love refusing to leave completely. The girl whispered into the dimness, "I'm trying," and felt deep inside the gentlest answer, "So am I." Time moved forward in small increments. The girl grew a little. Her legs lengthened, her voice strengthened. Her understanding of danger sharpened in ways it shouldn't have to. The warmth stayed with her, sometimes faint, sometimes intense, always arriving like a quiet nudge at the edge of ordinary moments. Sometimes it was a warning that saved someone without anyone ever realizing. A gate that got latched, a puddle that got wiped, a leash that got tightened, a pause that prevented a fall. Sometimes it was bigger, and the adult kept believing her. Not as a story to tell neighbors, not as something mystical to show off, but as a pattern to respect. They watched her closely, yes, but they also watched the world with her now. They listened when she tapped twice. They moved when she pointed. They treated her instincts like an early alarm, not a childish whim. It helped. It made the warmth feel less like a weight and more like a partnership. On a bright morning months later, the street looked harmless again. Sunlight warmed the pavement. Birds hopped along a fence. A distant engine started and faded away. It was the kind of morning that made people forget how fast life could tip. The girl and the adult walked toward the corner store, hands linked, steps easy. For the first half of the block, the warmth was quiet. Then it flickered. The girl stopped mid-step. The adult stopped with her instantly. "Where?" the adult asked softly. The girl's eyes lifted. Down the street, a moving truck was parked near the I intersection. Hazard lights blinking. Two people carried furniture down a ramp. The driver was in the cab, engine running. The street was busy but manageable. Just another day of people coming and going. The warmth pressed harder, sharper, like a finger tapping insistently against her ribs. The adult followed her gaze, scanning. "I don't see," they began. Then a small sound caught the girl's attention. The thin, high squeak of a scooter wheel. A child, maybe 7, maybe 8, was gliding down. The sidewalk faster than they should, head turned toward a friend behind them, laughing. The scooter's path aimed straight toward the narrow gap between the moving truck's ramp and the curb. The exact spot where the driver couldn't see clearly, where the furniture carriers were focused on their load, where a single wobble could send a child into the street. The warmth surged, fierce and immediate. The girl inhaled to shout and felt her voice catch again, the same terrifying lock as before, as if the warning inside her had turned into something so strong it stole breath itself. The scooter rolled closer. The moving truck's reverse lights blinked on. The scooter rolled closer. The child riding it leaned into the motion, weight shifting without thinking, one foot hovering just above the pavement in case they needed to catch themselves. Their laughter carried down the block, light and careless, bouncing off fences and parked cars. It was the sound of someone who believed the world would Move out of their way. The moving truck's reverse lights blinked steadily now, red against the pale morning. The engine note changed, dropping slightly, the subtle signal that the vehicle was about to move. One of the furniture carriers adjusted their grip on a couch, stepping backward without looking. The ramp angled down toward the sidewalk, narrowing the path even more. The girl tried to scream again. Her chest expanded, air rushing in, but her throat locked tight, the sound strangled before it could exist. Panic flared, hot and sharp, but underneath it was something colder and clearer. The warmth surged with it, not chaotic, not panicked. Focused, urgent. She couldn't shout, so she moved. Her hand slipped free of the adult's grip, not yanked, not frantic, just gone in one smooth motion. The adult's fingers closed on air, surprise flashing across their face as they turned. "Hey!" The adult started. The girl didn't look back. She ran toward the street, not straight at the scooter, not into the truck's blind spot, but diagonally, cutting across the open space where the driver would see movement if he looked up at the right moment. Her feet slapped against the pavement, each step chosen without conscious thought, guided by that invisible pressure along her spine that seemed to tilt the world just enough to show her where to go. The warmth was everywhere now, filling her chest, her arms, her legs. It didn't feel like being pushed. It felt like being held upright while running. The scooter rider glanced forward at the last second and froze, confused by the sudden figure crossing their path. They swerved instinctively, handlebars jerking to the side. The scooter wobbled, wheels skidding slightly on the smooth concrete. "Stop!" the girl tried to shout. The word came out as breath and movement instead of sound. She threw her arms out wide, making herself bigger, blocking the narrow gap between the ramp and the curb. The furniture carrier heard the scrape of the scooter wheel and turned sharply, couch still balanced against their shoulder. "Whoa!" The driver glanced up through the side mirror, finally registering motion that didn't belong. His eyes widened as he saw the girl in front of the ramp, saw the scooter veering, saw the chaos aligning in a way no mirror could have warned him about. He slammed the brake. The truck lurched, metal creaking as the weight shifted. The ramp shuddered but didn't move further. The furniture carrier stumbled backward, losing balance for a half-second before another worker grabbed their arm and steadied them. The scooter tipped. The child riding it fell sideways, not forward into the street, but toward the curb, landing hard on their hip and hands. The scooter clattered away, skidding to a stop against a parked car. The girl dropped to her knees beside them without thinking, one hand gripping the scooter's handlebar to keep it from rolling again, the other hovering near the fallen child, unsure where to touch. "Don't move," she said, voice finally breaking free, hoarse but real. "You're okay. You're okay." The child blinked, stunned more than hurt, breath coming in short gasps. Their eyes darted from her to the truck to the adults rushing toward them. Tears welled, late and sudden. I wasn't looking," they said, voice cracking. "I know," the girl said quietly. Hands were on her shoulders now, lifting her gently back, pulling her out of the immediate mess. The adult was there, breathless, face pale, eyes shining with fear and something close to awe. "You ran," the adult said, not accusing, just stunned. "You ran right into it." The girl shook her head weakly. "Not into it," she whispered. "Across it." The warmth began to fade, retreating slowly, like a tide pulling back after reaching its furthest point. In its absence, exhaustion crashed down on her so fast she swayed on her feet. The adult caught her, arms wrapping around her securely. The scooter rider's parent appeared from the other side of the street, face contorted with terror that had only just arrived. They dropped to their knees beside their child, hands shaking as they checked arms and legs, voice breaking with relief when they found nothing seriously wrong. "Oh my God," the parent kept repeating. "Oh my God, oh my God." The workers stood frozen, furniture forgotten, faces tight with shock. The driver climbed out of the cab slowly, hands raised as if approaching something fragile. "I didn't see them," he said again, the phrase worn thin by repetition. I know," the adult said, voice sharp but controlled. "That's the problem." No one argued. The street slowly reassembled itself. The couch was set down carefully. The scooter was handed back. The ramp was folded up, this time with someone standing at the end, watching the sidewalk like it mattered. The girl leaned heavily against the adult, every muscle trembling. The warmth was almost gone now, leaving behind a hollow ache that made her want to curl inward. "You okay?" the adult murmured, forehead resting briefly against the top of her head. She nodded, though she wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. They walked home in silence, the adult's arm wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The house welcomed them with its familiar smells and quiet. But the safety felt thin now, stretched. Inside, the adult knelt in front of her again, hands steady but eyes not. "You couldn't scream," they said softly. "Again." The girl swallowed. "It happens. When it's close," she whispered. "When it's really close." The adult closed their eyes, inhaled slowly, then nodded. "Okay," they said. "Then we plan for that too." They talked quietly, voices low and careful, about what to do when her voice failed, about movement instead of sound, about blocking paths, creating obstacles, pulling attention with presence instead of shouting. They talked like people mapping exits in a building they hoped would never catch fire. That night, the girl lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The warmth returned, faint but steady, settling into her chest like a familiar weight. Not overwhelming now, tired maybe, changed. Her mother had already passed. That truth remained, immovable. But love didn't seem to understand the finality of that word. Love kept finding ways to act through timing, through instinct, through a child who noticed things a fraction of a second before everyone else did. "I can't always do it," the girl whispered into the dark, fear creeping in at the edges. "I'm not fast enough. I'm not big enough." The warmth pulsed gently, like an answer without language. Days went by without incident, then more days. The world lulled itself into normalcy again. Trucks came and went, scooters zipped past. Life continued, unaware of how many times it had almost tipped. The girl returned to school. She played. She laughed. She tried to be just a child. But the warmth never left. Sometimes it stirred when nothing happened, leaving her tense for minutes that stretched too long. Sometimes it stayed quiet when she expected it, making her question herself, doubt her own instincts. One afternoon, weeks later, she was walking home alone for the first time in a while, the adult watching from the porch as she made her way down the block. The street was quiet. No trucks, no vans, no construction. Halfway home, the warmth flared suddenly, sharp enough to make her gasp. She stopped. Nothing obvious moved. No engines changed pitch. No shadows shifted. The street looked empty and harmless. Then she heard it, a faint clicking sound, metal against metal, coming from behind a parked car ahead. She took a cautious step forward, heart pounding. From behind the car, a bicycle rolled slowly into view, its rider struggling with the chain, head down, unaware that a car further up the street had just shifted into reverse. The warmth surged violently. Her voice caught in her throat. And for the first time, there was no adult close enough to help. No one watching from a window. No one within arm's reach to pull into the moment with her. She was alone. The car's reverse lights flicked on. The bicycle rolled forward. And she understood, with terrifying clarity, that this time the decision would be hers alone. And whatever she chose to do would happen without anyone there to catch her if she misjudged the timing by even a second. She was alone. The reverse lights glowed red against the quiet street, reflected faintly in the dampness that never quite left the pavement even on a clear day. The bicycle rolled forward slowly, not fast enough to look like danger, not slow enough to be harmless. The rider's head was still dipped, attention fixed on the chain that had slipped, fingers greasy and impatient as they tried to coax metal back into place. Behind them, the car's engine rumbled low, a sound that could have meant nothing at all if you weren't listening for it. The driver's foot eased off the brake. The car began to creep, backward. The girl's throat tightened. She tried to call out and felt the same lock seize her voice. Not a cough, not a squeak. Just air caught behind a closed door. The warmth surged hard, so strong it made her vision sharpen around the edges. It didn't feel like panic. It felt like focus sharpened into urgency. Her mother had already passed, that truth fixed and heavy at the center of her life, and yet the familiar presence pressed into her chest as if saying, "Look now, do not wait." She couldn't shout, so she measured. She measured the distance between the bicycle and the car, the angle of the reverse, the gap between the parked car and the curb, the nearest door, the closest adult. There was no one, no neighbor on a porch, no adult at a window. The street was a stage with only her on it, and she hated that she had become someone who could see the trap before others did. The bicycle rolled another foot. The rider glanced up for half a second, then down again, annoyed, pushing the pedals lightly to test the chain. The tires made a soft, steady whisper against the pavement. The car backed more. The driver's head turned slightly, eyes flicking to mirrors, but their view was blocked by the parked car. The bicycle and rider were in the space the driver couldn't see. The warmth pushed her sideways. Not into the road, not under wheels. Sideways, toward something small and ordinary that her eyes caught only because the warmth insisted she look. Near the curb, half hidden by weeds at the edge of a lawn, sat a plastic yard sign someone had tossed aside. Its thin metal legs were bent. Its face was blank now, faded by sun and rain. Lightweight, bright, loud when it hit something. Her fingers tingled as if reaching for it before she decided to. She moved quickly, controlled, feet careful on the sidewalk. She snatched the sign by its edge, the plastic slick against her palm. The bent legs scraped the concrete with a sharp sound. The bicycle rider glanced up again, distracted, brows knitting. The car continued, reversing. The girl took 2 fast steps forward and planted the sign upright in the narrow space beside the bicycle's back wheel, not touching the rider, not grabbing them, just creating a barrier that forced attention. She angled it like a bright wall right in the bicycle's path. Then she shifted her weight and slapped the side of the parked car with her free hand, hard. The sound cracked through the quiet street like a small explosion. The driver in. The reversing car jolted, head snapping toward the noise. The bicycle rider flinched too, eyes shooting up. The chain, forgotten, clicked once as the pedal moved under their foot. The girl pointed, sharp and unmistakable, at the reverse lights and the unseen car behind the parked vehicle. She couldn't speak, but her entire body said the words. "Stop. Look. Now." The bicycle rider's eyes widened. They froze mid-motion, and that freeze mattered. They put their feet down, stabilizing. They stopped, rolling. The plastic sign wobbled as their wheel brushed it, and it toppled, clattering against the curb. The driver, suddenly alert, hit the brake. The reversing car stopped with a soft jerk. A breath that had been trapped in the girl's chest escaped in a shaking rush. The driver leaned out the window, confused and irritated at first. "What?" they started, then saw the bicycle rider, saw how close they'd been, saw the girl's white knuckles gripping the discarded sign. The irritation drained. Away. Their face tightened, then paled. "I didn't see," the driver said, voice rough. "I didn't see them." The bicycle rider looked down at their own hands, still half covered in grease. They swallowed hard. "I didn't hear you coming," they said, voice unsteady. I was looking down." The girl's voice still wouldn't come. She stood there, shaking, the sign's bent metal legs trembling in her grip. The warmth inside her held for another second, steadying her knees, keeping her upright. Then began to recede like water pulling back after reaching the shore. In the absence of it, everything felt too bright, too loud. Her heartbeat filled her ears. The bicycle rider backed their bike away from the curb, eyes flicking from the girl to the car, then back again. "Thank you," they said, quieter. "Seriously, thank you." The driver nodded quickly, hands tight on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry," they said to the rider, then to the girl as if she had been part of the danger too. "I'm sorry." The car shifted into park and stayed there. No one moved for a moment. The street breathed again, slowly. The girl's throat loosened and her voice returned in a small, cracked whisper. "Please, look," she managed, and the words were so simple they felt almost ridiculous compared to what had nearly happened. The driver nodded again, eyes wet. "I will," they promised. And maybe they meant it. Maybe fear would keep the promise for them. The bicycle rider wheeled their bike toward the sidewalk, chain still loose, hands now shaking as they tried to fix it. They sat on the curb, breathing hard, staring at the ground as if it might open and swallow them. The girl turned and began walking home. Her legs felt weak, each step heavier than the last. The warmth was now a faint hum far behind her ribs, as if it had retreated to a safer distance. Not gone, just quieter, tired. When she reached her front gate, she stopped and held onto it for a second, steadying herself. Her palms were damp. The metal felt cold. She opened the gate and walked up the path. The adult was on the porch, exactly where she had left them. Their posture told her they had been watching the entire time. Their face was drained of color. They didn't shout her name. They didn't rush into the street. They waited until she was close enough, until they could pull her in without creating another hazard. As soon as she reached the bottom step, the adult moved, grabbing her shoulders gently but firmly, checking her face, her arms, her knees, as if they expected to find bruises from a fall they hadn't seen. "Are you hurt?" the adult asked, voice shaking. The girl shook her head. Then she tried to speak, and her voice broke on the first word. "I couldn't," she whispered, then swallowed hard. "I couldn't yell." The adult closed their eyes for a moment, pain tightening their face. They pulled her into a tight hug, the kind that said, "I'm here, I'm here, I'm here." "I saw," the adult whispered into her hair. "I saw. You hit the car. I saw the sign. You didn't run into the road." The girl clung to them, breathing in the safe smell of home, the familiar scent of laundry soap and warm air. Her body trembled with the aftershock of what almost happened, and she hated that her life had become a sequence of almost. The adult guided her inside. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and the house felt quieter than it should. The kitchen clock ticked. A distant dog barked. Ordinary sounds, but they felt fragile now like glass. They sat at the table again, the same table where they had whispered about missing her, about believing, about rules and tapping and looking. The adult poured water into a cup and slid it toward her. The girl drank, hands shaking so much the water rippled over the rim. The adult watched her carefully, then reached across and took her hand again. Their palm was warm, real, steady. "You did what we practiced," the adult said softly. "You made them look." The girl nodded, eyes stinging. "It was close," she whispered. "I know," the adult said, their voice cracked. "I hate that you have to know that." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The girl stared at their joined hands and felt the faint warmth in her chest, like a small candle protected from wind. The presence was there, not as a spectacle, not as something that could be shown to anyone, but as a familiar steadiness that had carried her through again. Her mother had already passed. The missing space in her life would never be filled. But the love that had shaped her, the instincts built by gentle hands, the care that had once fixed shoelaces and closed gates and pulled her away from hot surfaces, somehow that care still moved through her world like a quiet current. The adult squeezed her hand. "Do you want to tell me," they asked carefully, "what it feels like? When it happens?" The girl swallowed. Words were hard, but she tried, because the adult had earned the truth by believing her. "It's like a pause," she whispered. "Like the world holds its breath. And I feel warm, like when I used to fall asleep and she would sit on my bed." The adult's eyes filled with tears. They nodded, looking down, letting the emotion pass through their face without hiding it. "I remember that," they whispered. The girl's chest ached. "Sometimes it's gentle," she said. "Sometimes it's strong, and sometimes it makes my voice stop." The adult looked up sharply at that, fear flickering. "Why?" The girl shook her head. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's like it wants me to move, not talk. Like it needs my body faster than my words." The adult sat back, breathing slowly as if trying to keep their own panic from infecting the room. "Okay," they said softly. "Then we keep practicing, and we keep making the street safer so you don't have to be the first alarm." The girl nodded, exhausted. That evening, the adult walked with her outside again, not to test her, not to push her, but to reclaim the sidewalk as something other than a battlefield. They walked slowly to the corner and back. The adult pointed out safe places to stand, angles where drivers could see, ways to make noise without stepping into danger. The girl listened, but she also listened to the quieter thing inside her, the faint warmth that came and went like breath. At the corner, she stopped and looked up the street. A delivery van passed, steady and slow. A child on a bike rode safely on the sidewalk, parent walking beside them. A neighbor waved. Life continued. The adult squeezed her hand. "You're not alone," they said. The girl wanted to believe that. She did, in a way. But part of her also felt the truth hidden inside the sentence. She had been alone sometimes, and the warmth had been what kept her from falling into that loneliness completely. That night she lay in bed, eyes open in the dark. The warmth arrived softly, settling into the room like someone sitting down carefully at the edge of her mattress. Not visible, not loud, just present. Her throat tightened with emotion, not fear. "I did it," she whispered into the darkness. "I made them look." The warmth pulsed gently, like a hand smoothing her hair. She turned her face into her pillow, letting a quiet sob escape. "I miss you," she whispered. No words answered. They never did. But the presence stayed, steady as a heartbeat. And in that steadiness was everything she needed to know. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood changed in small ways. People paid more attention near driveways. Someone fixed a broken reverse alarm on a work truck. A contractor began using a spotter without being asked. Parents tightened their grip on stroller handles near curbs. The changes weren't dramatic, but they mattered. They were the kind of safety that came from remembering that ordinary moments could turn sharp. The girl still felt the warmth sometimes. But it came less violently, less often like a siren, more often like a gentle nudge, a reminder. A hand on her shoulder when she stepped too close to the edge of something, and slowly she learned to live with it. She learned that she didn't have to run into danger to make a difference. She could stop. She could point. She could slap a car and make a driver look up. She could be the pause that saved someone without becoming the sacrifice. She also learned something else, something quieter and deeper. Her mother had already passed. The world would always say that and mean absence. But the girl had learned to recognize another kind of truth, that love could outlast presence, that care could become instinct, that protection could be woven into the smallest choices until it felt like it belonged to the air itself. One night, long after the scooter and the moving truck and the bicycle and the reversing car, she sat at the table drawing. The adult moved around the kitchen, humming softly, the sound relaxed. Safe. The girl drew a simple street, a sidewalk, a tiny figure holding an adult's hand, a truck far away, a bright sign planted near a curb, nothing dramatic, just ordinary pieces arranged carefully. She added one more thing without thinking, a faint outline behind the child, like a shadow made of warmth rather than darkness. She didn't draw a face. She didn't draw anything that looked like a ghost, just a shape that suggested presence, the way you might draw wind by showing what it moved. The adult glanced at the drawing and paused. Their eyes softened. They didn't ask questions. They didn't correct her. They just rested a hand briefly on her head, a gentle touch that felt like confirmation. The warmth in the girl's chest pulsed once, steady and calm. And as she set the pencil down, she realized something that made her breath catch, not from fear this time, but from the strange tenderness of it. The warmth wasn't only warning her about danger anymore. It was teaching her how to live after loss. She looked toward the hallway where night waited, and, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like the world was holding its breath. Still, when she turned off the light and walked to bed, the warmth followed. Quiet, constant. And just as she closed her eyes, she heard a soft creak from somewhere in the house, one floorboard settling, the kind of sound that used to mean nothing at all. The warmth tightened slightly. Her eyes opened. From the other room, the adult called out casually, "Did you hear that?" The girl held her breath, listening. And in the quiet that followed, she realized the warmth wasn't easing the way it usually did at night. It was rising,